3 years. And so we sort of tabled the proposal, and I told her, but you never know, things have a way of changing sometimes very quickly. And in May of 2010, there was this really infamous attack against the flotilla of ships, the Mavi Marmara and so on which 9 activists were killed. And in the aftermath of that incident, the Egyptians, faced with heavy backlash, opened the border briefly. So I emailed her immediately and said, okay, it's go time, it's now or never. And we went there quickly because you never know, it could quickly close again. And we did all our research at that time. In June, I went to film this episode with CNN, and I was able to get in, but then right after I left, a week later, the border closed. So it's very unpredictable. And this is kind of the, very thematic of a lot of the situation in Gaza. You never know how restricted the fishing zone will be or how far out you can go into the perimeter area here where I was talking about this buffer zone. Sometimes it's 2 kilometers, sometimes it's 200 meters. So it's this constant uncertainty that is really very nerve-wracking. Yeah, that's the twist, yeah. And anyway, he was explaining to me that the aquifer, what happens is before the water comes, ends into Gaza, it's pumped by Israel, and a lot of it is diverted, and so that's another part of the problem, is before it ends up here. And he was saying there's no reason, and he was talking about these projects that Avigdor Lieberman, the Israeli foreign minister, was endorsing along with the Palestinian Authority. It seemed like such a great idea, but he's like, which was to create a desalination plant in Gaza. Why is the really right-wing Israeli foreign minister supporting this? Because it would mean not having to divert, giving us access to our own water. There's no reason we need a desalination plant when there's perfectly plenty of water in the West Bank and other areas that they are basically stealing and abusing the resources. So the water table is very polluted, very saline. But then, on the other hand, we speak to some hydrologists that insist that the municipality water, which comes a few times a week, is perfectly fine, it's filtered, it's whatever, and that people are just so afraid because there was a concern about it being polluted and highly saline, and it is in a lot of areas, but that some of it is okay, and that really they could be using it if they boiled it. But what's happened is now 90% of the people actually have to use filtered water, which is why the concern about the schools not having access to filtered water, that being a problem, and Mecca working on the Middle East Children's Alliance working on these projects of providing water filtration. And it's not just like filtered water for drinking, it's for cooking, it's for making tea, it's for everything, for brushing your teeth. There was a time when the water was so bad that you couldn't even brush your teeth without getting sick. It's not like that now, but you can't use the tap water to cook with, and that's the problem. So imagine having to use, and it's not as expensive as buying spring water, but it still costs money. You shouldn't have to, again, be purchasing water in an area where you have plenty of water, just don't have access to it. So there's even a debate about that, and then what to do, and it's really just a sheer miracle, honestly, that the situation has not gotten any worse, because the aquifer is such that there's such a high level of sedimentation that actually filters the water and has been replenishing the water table. So that's the only thing that has kept them going. It's a very interesting from an ecological perspective, and because there's this heavy current that goes across this area of the coast, it drags away all the sewage that's dumped in because there's no water sewage treatment plant. So it's, again, Gaza is as bad as it is, it's blessed. There's all these little blessings that it has, and if it weren't for that, it probably would have just completely disappeared from the face of the earth. So yeah, the water situation is very grave. It really makes you very appreciative, after having lived there for so long, of having access to running water that's clean. And this applies obviously in a lot of areas of the world, but having access to a tap with clean water and then not using that. I always find now they're not using that, or people who purchase spring water don't drink their tap water. Well, why would you do that? Go live somewhere where they don't have access to water, and you realize how absurd that is. But specifically about the current context, it's not a siege or blockade of food. It's not like we just don't have food here, and the implication being that if we dumped enough food on Gaza, that would solve the problem. It's a blockade and siege of freedoms. I think that's the real message that I kept hearing. The freedom of our ability to fish more than 3 nautical miles and to sea, freedom to be able to access our farmlands along the buffer zone, freedom for students to be able to attend universities and in the West Bank and go attend places of worship in Jerusalem. All of these things they can't do. We never think of that when we think of blockade. We just think of, oh, poor Gaza, no food, starving Gaza. But we don't think of these other things, and it's gone to the point where nobody realizes that really they've worked very deliberately towards the fragmentation of the Palestinian population and the complete separation of Gaza from the West Bank, from Jerusalem, from other parts of Palestine. And they've tried to create this de facto reality where, you know, if somebody complains about not being able to attend a university, well, just go to Egypt or go somewhere else. So like that's the other option, when they just no longer have access to their other parts of their own nation and country and families and so forth. And of course the impact on families who may be from different parts of Palestine, West Bank and Gaza, can't live together anymore, can't visit each other. So that was really the message. It's just completely violated and the very fabric of life there, basically, and that it was framing it as an issue of freedoms and rights, not one of just like food and real estate or something. So that was really the message that I heard. And in terms of what can be done, I mean, it's you know, just being able to stand in solidarity, continuing to support projects like the ones that Mecca and others and your groups here are doing, and also engaging in BDS. These things are all very, very important to the people there, and they recognize that, and they, you know, they themselves, as Ahmad Burnat says in the End of Five Broken Cameras, the only obligation that they have is to be able to endure and survive. That's the only thing we can expect the victim to do. We shouldn't. But here on the outside, we have access to more resources and we're more privileged. I think we should have higher expectations and be able to support them in whatever ways we know how. And I think, you know, it's the successes of BDS have really begun to show, and that's, I think, where we should take things to the next steps. So.
Just to explain what BDS.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. It's so boycott, divestment, and sanctions for those not familiar. And you know, I don't know if anybody wants to touch more on that, but yeah, different, basically, and that includes cultural, economic, and academic, and it was a call put out by Palestinian civil society groups in 2009, calling on groups around the world and people of conscience to support them in BDS efforts. And so there's been this effort ever since to follow suit and there's different kinds of initiatives, and you can find more information at endoccupation.org, which is the website for the US campaign to end the Israeli occupation. It's an umbrella group of 400 groups, and find out how your local, your city, I wish Maggie was here because she can talk very more eloquently about this Maggie culture, but what are the different projects and initiatives happening in your towns and cities. And I know that there was a campaign here against Veolia when I was last year. I don't know if that's still going on. Soda Stream's another big one. But it's not just, you know, consumer products as well. It's they work also, like I was saying, on cultural and academic boycotting and divestment. Universities are frequently asked to divest local governments or to divest from Israeli bonds and things like that. So yeah, and this was a strategy that was very effective again until it reached when it reached a certain tipping point when it came to South Africa during the apartheid regime. So. And then there's different variations of this. In some areas, they also add cucumbers in the end, and you can really tell based on the ingredients in each one. Okay, yeah, great. Yeah, that's fine. And then, you know, by the way, this is frequently the salad prepared by men, actually. This is another one of those things that we discovered. There's certain things that are almost exclusively made by men. Yeah, exactly.
But it might be better.